SpongeBob is one of the greatest cartoon characters of all time. It follows the adventures of misadventures of a talking square yellow sea sponge who works at a fast food restaurant, attends a boating school, and lives in a submerged pineapple with his pet snail Gary in the city of Bikini Bottom on the floor of the Pacific Ocean. His favorite pastimes include jellyfishing, which involves catching jellyfish and blowing soap bubbles into elaborate shapes. During his time off, SpongeBob is known for attracting trouble with his starfish best friend Patrick. Arrogant octopus Squidward Tentacles, SpongeBob's neighbor, dislikes SpongeBob because of his childlike behavior. The show consists of 14 seasons with a total of 299 episodes and a few movies. Here, we're not only going to sum it up in chronological order, but we're also going to go through the background and best events of the most recurring characters briefly from beginning to end. And without further delay, bring some snacks and let's get into it. SpongeBob is born in 1986 to Harold and Margaret SquarePants. When he was in the womb, he tasted Krabby Patty for the first time, and that's when his love for it started. He was even dreaming of flipping it even before popping out. SpongeBob meets Patrick at camp while he's crying. He cheers him up, and the two go jellyfishing and decide to become best friends. This doesn't make sense continuity-wise because SpongeBob is set to meet Patrick when they're babies and the others when he's an adult. But let's turn a blind eye because does it matter? The two share a lot of traits and become friends regardless. During SpongeBob's childhood, and because he was nice, optimistic, and wouldn't hurt a fly, he was the target of bullies like his classmate Flats the Flounder and his cousin Blackjack, and he couldn't stick up for himself. When he joined adult life, SpongeBob's first job was as a bag boy at a supermarket, but customers were fed up with his silliness, so the manager fired him and Patrick. The two take a few other jobs, but fail miserably. An adult should own a house, and that's what SpongeBob does. And just as he was on the hunt for his first house, a pineapple fell off a boat, and he chose to live in it. His neighbors were Patrick, of course, and Squidward, and let's not forget his pet Gary, which he adopted when he was a kid. Since the day he tasted Krabby Patty, SpongeBob's dream was to work at Krusty Krab, and since they were hiring, he applied for the job. But since Squidward was fed up with him, he convinced Mr. Krab to make it almost impossible to join the crew. However, SpongeBob saved them when they were in trouble and earned his position as the fry cook. Now that SpongeBob became the fry cook, it's only natural that he knew the secret formula of Krabby Patty. And since it's super secretive, SpongeBob's loyalty is put to the test when Plankton tries his best to make SpongeBob speak. He even goes as far as controlling SpongeBob's mind, but SpongeBob stays trustworthy. SpongeBob has met everyone already except for Sandy. SpongeBob becomes fascinated by air and learns that Sandy lives in an air-filled tree dome. He visits Sandy and struggles with the dry environment. Sandy helps him by providing a water-filled helmet. They engage in activities together and form a lasting friendship. And with this, he and his friends engage in so many adventures.
Let's talk about Patrick. We all know that Patrick is SpongeBob's dumb partner in crime and that the two met each other in their childhood. Again, let's a blind eye to the continuity here. However, let's dive more into his life. Margie, Patrick's mother, fell in love with Herb Starr, Patrick's father, when they went to the world's least exciting sweater, and the two married and had Patrick, who, well, he doesn't really have a specific birthday, so he celebrates 3 of them. Patrick had a regular childhood. However, when he was a toddler, his parents would ring a bell for Patrick to take a bath, causing Patrick to have a severe tantrum every time he heard a bell. When he was a kid, he tended to recite poems during gym class. This ruined his reputation and made him a target for dodgeball players. Later, he attempted Camp Coral, where he reunited with SpongeBob and met his future neighbor Squidward as his counselor. When he was 19, he starred in his imaginary variety program, The Patrick Show, before dropping it. As an adult, he moved out and rented a rock house, eventually to own, because his parents kicked him out and forced him to live on his own so that he could rely on himself.
Well, sure, it's easy. I built my house all by myself.
Just like that, he became Squidward's neighbor and SpongeBob, who would come later on. Years later, they are impressed that he can do basic tasks like getting dressed.
Wow, son! You actually recognized us this time.
And you remembered to get dressed today.
At some point, Patrick went to community college with Flats the Flounder, although he forgot what he studied there and he likely failed to graduate.
Just talking to my old community college buddy, Flats. I bumped into him at the soda store, isn't it?
Despite failing college, Patrick was able to get multiple jobs. But not for long, though. He was a chocolate seller, a wrestler, a cook at the Krusty Krab, a hero, a doctor, and even a legitimate king. He also gained but lost his driver's license. He once became a mascot for the frozen Krabby Patty, but soon went back to his usual life. He wrote a song called Twinkle Twinkle Patrick Star, and even rented out his front yard to a fish named Howard in New Fishin' Town. Everyone thought Patrick was a single child. However, he was reunited with his sister Sam after she got lost at sea when she and Patrick were children, and he never saw her again until they both became adults. He mentions how Sam was his rock when they were younger, and how she looked out for him before getting separated. He, along with SpongeBob, Squidward, Mr. Krabs, Sandy, and Plankton, became superheroes while on land to retrieve the Krabby Patty's secret formula from Burger Beard. In his old age, Patrick lives with SpongeBob at a nursing home. Now let's go ahead and talk about Squidward's story. Since Squidward traveled through time, his existence dates back thousands of years. So basically, Squidward travels back in time to the prehistoric era where we see SpongeBob, Squidward, and Patrick as primitive creatures, living in the oldest part of Bikini Bottom. When thunder strikes, the three discover fire for the first time and fight over who uses it to cook food. When future Squidward finds SpongeBob and Patrick, he teaches them how to jellyfish so that they don't kill him, and that becomes their hobby. Squidward hates jellyfishing, but doesn't know that he invented it.
Who's the barnacle head who invented that game anyway? You are, Squidward!
We also discover that Squidward's tentacles family descended from Squidosaurus rex, the very first ancestor from the Cretaceous period. Not much is said about Squidward's childhood. However, his parents seem to be separated since his mother lives alone, which explains why he goes to therapy often. He also remembers her as a strict and bad-tempered motherly figure. However, she has turned out to be a strangely insensible character compared to her son. As for his father, and according to Squidward himself, his father loved him very much. Despite that, he disliked his son's clarinet playing, so he made him cry by taking it away. However, he gave him a toy that had the exact sound of a clarinet. Squidward wanted to be a recognized artist since he was a kid, so he started playing the kazoo everywhere, and people used to run away covering their ears whenever he did. Later on, Squidward decided to pursue a professional career and play the clarinet instead in one of his choral camps. But everyone ignored him, so he decided to quit, but SpongeBob convinced him not to. In the present time, Squidward becomes fed up with living in Bikini Bottom and moves to a gated community called Tentacle Acres, also known as Squidville. Squidville is a village exclusively for octopi, and Squidward is excited to be surrounded by other squids like himself. Though he enjoys the initial similarities with his new neighbors and engages in activities like biking, interpretive dance, and playing clarinet, Squidward does get bored with this repetitive routine. Squidward also has a rival called Squilliam. Their rivalry dates back to their high school band class, and Squilliam is more successful and often humiliates and mocks Squidward while boasting about his own achievements and wealth. However, there are instances where Squidward manages to triumph over Squilliam, just like that time when he challenges Squidward to perform at the Bubble Bowl, a prestigious halftime show. Squidward panics and recruits SpongeBob to assemble a band from fellow residents of Bikini Bottom. Despite the lack of musical talent and that initial chaos during rehearsals, SpongeBob's optimism and determination keep the band motivated. As the day of the Bubble Bowl arrives, the band begins to perform, and they surprise everyone with an incredible performance, leaving poor Squilliam astounded. As we all know, Squidward hates his job as much as he was annoyed with SpongeBob. But did you know that one day he quits? So Squidward expresses his dissatisfaction with SpongeBob, who sympathizes with Squidward and suggests they go on strike to demand better working conditions and higher pay. The two create picket signs and gather outside the Krusty Krab, refusing to work until their demands are met. However, their strike, well, it didn't go as planned. Meanwhile, Mr. Krabs initially dismisses the strike, but soon realizes the negative impact it has on his business. To resolve the situation, Mr. Krabs agrees to meet SpongeBob and Squidward's demands, but of course he tricks them by giving them fake raises and then assigning them additional tasks. Eventually, Squidward and SpongeBob do return to work. But this is not the only time he quits. He does it once again when Mr. Krab accuses him of stealing. So Squidward goes on a spree of jobs until he ends up poor and homeless. SpongeBob, being the kind-hearted sponge that he is, offered to take Squidward home, but of course the latter took advantage of him and started treating him like a maid. SpongeBob got fed up and begged Mr. Krab to take Squidward back, which he did. Now, I really don't think that we can speak about Squidward without mentioning his iconic memes.
Let me... Squidward, you're even more handsome now!
So, let me tell y'all where it originated from. Now, Squidward becomes handsome after an accident involving SpongeBob slamming a door on his face, so he collapses. At the hospital, the doctor and a nurse faint when they see his face. Squidward is thrilled with his new appearance, and people start flocking to him. My boy becomes a celebrity. He even heals the sick and performs miracles. Unfortunately, Squidward slams his face again and returns back to his normal appearance. I know that it seems out of character, but bear with me. Squidward falls in love. This happens when Patrick disguises himself as a woman and starts working in the Krusty Krab. Patrick has no idea why the other characters are acting so strangely towards him, and when the other characters discover the truth, they are shocked and disappointed. Oh, let's get back to love interests, because there was this time that Squidward fell in love with a real woman. So, one day, a female cephalopod named Squilvia enters the Krusty Krab, and Squidward immediately falls for her. However, he is too nervous to ask Squilvia out for himself, so SpongeBob offers to arrange a date for them. He sets up the date and even helps Squidward practice by dressing up as Squilvia for a pretend date. But during the practice, Squidward loses his patience and angrily scolds SpongeBob. Unbeknownst to Squidward, Squilvia overhears his outburst. Surprisingly, Squilvia finds Squidward's angry side a little bit attractive. She takes him on their actual date, appreciating that he doesn't suffer fools lightly. Now let's go on about Mr. Krabs. Mr. Krabs descends from a family of royals and then pirates. And when he was a kid, he dreamed of becoming a pirate just like his grandfather. Mr. Krabs lived in extreme poverty. He didn't even have clothes. His mother had to sew him some from old Jenkins washcloths. Mr. Krabs knew Plankton since he was a baby, and the two actually became best friends. In school, they bonded even more since they were both bullied, one for being small and one for being poor. One day, he and Plankton go to the entertainment park, and Mr. Krabs notices a penny on the ground. He instantly falls in love and buys Plankton a gift with it. Now, at that time, there was this other burger place called Stinky Food. The two of them went to get some burgers, but the owner treated them poorly and flaunted his wealth. The two realized that they needed to sell burgers as well so that they, too, could become rich. So the two dedicated their time to create a better burger, and they managed to sell it for $1. Mr. Krabs was thankful to Old Man Jenkins and gave him a burger. When the latter ate it, he collapsed, and Plankton and Mr. Krab thought they killed him, so they fought. And this fight resulted in the birth of the secret formula of Krabby Patty. The two became business rivals, and Plankton tries stealing the secret formula and recreating it at all costs, but he never succeeds. With the new formula, Krabby Patty becomes a hit and Mr. Krabs finally gets out of poverty. Despite that, and additionally him being an adult, Betsy Krabs, his mom, still has control over him. After his childhood and before owning a profitable business, Mr. Krabs was a cook in the Navy. His captain always scolded him for preparing delicious food because he wanted his crew to starve and stay focused. But Mr. Krabs disobeyed him anyway. One day their ship gets attacked by pirates and they decide to recruit Mr. Krab. Mr. Krabs left the Navy, joined the pirates, and later on he became their captain until he got tired and decided to retire. He sold his ship and bought what we call now the Krusty Krab, all while his grandfather was proud of him for continuing the family's legacy and thinking he's still a pirate. Despite being successful and rich, Mr. Krabs' greed and obsession with money continued to grow even more to the point where he starts stealing money from the Will of Wishes. He even refuses to give raises, so this latter quits. As for Plankton, he graduated from university, opened up the chum bucket, and married a computer that he invented despite the objection of his mother, who he invented too. Although he's rich and stingy, Mr. Krabs' notable quality is being cheap. He doesn't pay his employees, gives SpongeBob boots instead of his salary, and takes advantage of him because he loves his job. He's so cheap, he doesn't even get his daughter gifts on her birthday.
The SpongeBob story starts way before his existence when small aquatic aliens, the Atlassians, arrive at 23,000 BC. After roaming the universe for thousands of years, they decide to settle down and build an advanced civilization on the ocean floor, bringing with them the oldest living bubble from their original homeland, their most treasured relic. Many years later, in the prehistoric era, long before civilized times, and with Squidward, we travel back in time where we see the ancestors of SpongeBob and Patrick as primitive creatures living in the oldest part of Bikini Bottom. Fast forward in time, SpongeBob and Plankton travel through time with SpongeBob, claiming that they are now lost in time and that they ended up at an unknown location in an interdimensional spacecraft and encountered Bubbles. The two meet the One Who Watches, a dolphin named Bubbles. Bubbles explains that for the last 10,000 years, he's been watching the Earth to protect it from various disasters. Fast forward again to the advanced prehistoric era, where we see some recent descendants of primitive SpongeBob and Starfish Patrick and now Squidward. Life is significantly more civilized and looks a lot like the present life in SpongeBob. In this era, they discover fire and fight over who uses it to cook food. The Atlanteans spent their whole life building weapons to defend themselves in case they got invaded. However, they gave up on conflicts and hid their weapons so that everyone could live in harmony. Years after the Atlanteans chose harmony, the Flying Dutchman was born, died, and then haunted the seas for 5,000 years because his soul was never put to rest. Similarly, thousands of years later, King Neptune was born to be the Roman god of the sea. After Neptune's birth and many millennials, it is the medieval ages in Bikini Bottom, or Bikini Bottom Shire. In this period, we can see that Plankton's tyrant ancestor ruled for a short time until King Krabs sent SpongeBob and Patrick to save them. During this time, we can see that Bikini Bottom is even more civilized. Commoners live in houses and Krabby Patties were invented. Under the reign of King Krabs' lineage, we learn that Neptune locked his son away so that he would learn to be a good god like him. Many years later, and in the same time frame, the Star family, Patrick's ancestors, take over the throne and rule over Bikini Bottom. Also, Atlantis sinks, and the Neptune dynasty takes the throne after the Star family loses power. During this dynasty and decades before the present time, the Chimps, Sandy's higher-ups, begin their search for a banana peeler. We went through many eras, and now let's go to the Pirates one, where the leader is Redbeard Krab, Mr. Krabs' grandfather. During this period, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy were born. They are retired superheroes who now reside in a retirement home. However, they occasionally come out of retirement to fight crime and save the day. And talking about eras and time frames, there must be a recurring tradition that takes place. Periodically, that would be the snail race. And now that we're getting closer to the present time, Mr. Krab and Plankton, King Krabs and Planktonimer descendants are born. They become best friends and start the restaurant business together. The two accidentally kill Old Man Jenkins, and during the conflict, many ingredients fall into the Krabby Patty pot, creating creating the Krabby Patty formula. Mr. Krabs' business takes off because of it, while Plankton's fails. Years later, Mr. Krab opens Krusty Krabs. Plankton's attempts of stealing the secret formula begin. Their rivalry reaches its peak at the annual Fry Cook Games. Now that we're getting closer to the present, SpongeBob tastes his first Krabby Patty inside his mom's womb. In the year 1986, both he and Patrick are born, and they become lifelong best friends. A year later, Sandy is born in Texas. During his childhood, SpongeBob gets Larry as a pet, and then he and Patrick start going to school. A few years later, Mr. Krabs' daughter, Pearl Krabs, is born. Around the same time, the Earthling Sandy arrives in Bikini Bottom to pursue science. Sandy and SpongeBob become friends fast, and the shimps from many years ago come back. We finally reach the present day. Let's go through some of the best dates in the show. So, SpongeBob and Sandy have prepared a special Valentine's Day present for Patrick. Patrick becomes grumpy because SpongeBob received more gifts and wreaks havoc across the Valentine's Day carnival. Sandy arrives with his gift, which is a repaired chocolate balloon. However, Patrick accidentally pops it when he eats it like a bubble. In the end, Patrick tells SpongeBob that he didn't have to give him anything. So everybody is living their usual life until SpongeBob and Patrick almost ruin their friendship after competing against each other in the Fry Cook Games, where SpongeBob plays for Mr. Krab and Patrick plays for Plankton. Luckily, the two didn't let the other's rivalry break up their friendship. In Atlantis, SpongeBob and his friends explore Atlantis and meet Lord Royal Highness, the ruler of the city, and they are given a tour of the city's impressive features. Meanwhile, Plankton hatches a plan to steal the secret of the Atlantean bubble formula, hoping to use it for his evil purposes. He disguises himself as an Atlantean and infiltrates the city. SpongeBob and Patrick try to stop his nefarious scheme, and they manage to foil Plankton's plan and save Atlantis from his dastardly intentions. They're hailed as heroes by the Atlanteans, and Lord Royal Highness rewards them by allowing them to return home. After this, the crew is caught in yet another adventure, this time on an island. The friends are stuck in the said island, and the only way back home is by riding a wave called the Big One. They all work together to build a makeshift boat using the remains of Sandy's destroyed surfboard. Eventually, they reunite with Mr. Krabs and make a daring escape from the treacherous waves, narrowly avoiding the Big One. They all return safely to Bikini Bottom. Upon their return, they celebrate the 50th anniversary of Krusty Krab. However, they find only a single Krabby Patty inside. Disappointed by the discovery, they decide to put their items inside and bury their time capsule to leave something interesting for future generations. King Neptune arrives in Krusty Krab, intending to celebrate his 5,000th birthday there in Neptune. However, Triton, Neptune's rebellious son, is upset because he feels overshadowed by his father's greatness, so he decides to wreak havoc in Bikini Bottom by using his powers to turn everyone into various forms of sea creatures, including snails, clams, and crabs. He also captures his father, King Neptune, and traps him in a cage. SpongeBob, determined to save him and restore order to Bikini Bottom, enlists his friends to help him. With Triton defeated, SpongeBob releases King Neptune from his captivity and restores everyone to their original forms. In the end, King Neptune expresses his gratitude to SpongeBob and his friends for saving him and Bikini Bottom. And speaking of Bikini Bottom, Glove World, a popular theme park in Bikini Bottom that SpongeBob and Patrick regularly visit, shuts down and gets replaced by a bigger one. Fortunately for them, Squidward feels annoyed by SpongeBob and Patrick's constant interruptions while he tries to relax in the Krusty Krab. In his frustration, he hides inside the Krusty Krab freezer to have some peace, only to get frozen for 2,000 years. Fast forward to the grand opening of Krusty Krab 2 in 2034. Mr. Krabs promotes Squidward to manager, believing that SpongeBob is immature. After doing some math, the reason this takes place in 2034 is because SpongeBob stated that he was awarded Employee of the Month 374 times in a row, which equals 31 years and 2 months. But since he didn't get the award twice in 2 different episodes that were 2 years apart, that adds 4 years, meaning 1999 plus 4 equals 31 years and 4 months, 2034. In the meantime, Plankton steals King Neptune's crown and blames it on Mr. Krabs as part of his Plan Z scheme. Neptune then threatens Mr. Krab for the alleged thievery and is furious to hear that his crown is at Shell City and prepares to execute Mr. Krabs. However, SpongeBob steps in and promises to get the crown back for him in 6 days. SpongeBob and Patrick then set out to Shell City to retrieve the crown. However, they go through many trials throughout their journey until they're eventually captured by the Cyclops and are taken to Shell City. Knowing where they are, SpongeBob SpongeBob looks over to see King Neptune's crown, which is being sold for $7. They then dry up on the table, accepting their fate, but fortunately, their tears activate the sprinkler system inside Shell City, which revives them. As the other revived creatures attack the Cyclops, SpongeBob and Patrick take the crown and leave Shell City. On dry land, David Hasselhoff appears and agrees to give SpongeBob and Patrick a ride. Back at Bikini Bottom, Neptune is happy to have his crown back, but Plankton soon controls him with one of his chum bucket helmets. SpongeBob soon does a monologue about his journey before busting out into song and destroying all of the bucket helmets. Mindy then gives back the crown to King Neptune, and Plankton is soon arrested for framing Mr. Krabs. In the end, King Neptune claims that he believes that without the help of the sea creatures, in this context, SpongeBob and Patrick, he wouldn't have been able to get the crown back. He also unfreezes Krabs and apologizes for almost scorching him for no reason. Squidward gives his position to SpongeBob, and he becomes the new manager of Krusty Krab 2. Now we're heading into the future, decades later into the year 2085. Bikini Bottom has transformed into a futuristic city, and the time capsule is finally unearthed by a group of advanced robots. The robots, unaware of the significance of the items, discarded them as junk. Old SpongeBob tells his grandson stories that he and his friends, who are now also elderly. When Squidward emerges from the freezer, he meets Spongetron, a descendant of SpongeBob, and discovers that he's no longer in the Krusty Krab, but rather in a strange white space called the Time Vortex in the year 4017. Squidward wanders through the Time Vortex and eventually finds a time machine. He accidentally activates it and is transported 2,000 years into the future. Aliens discover the 8 Stonehenge stones replicas of SpongeBob in a fish field, hinting that SpongeBob is a historical figure. Nowhere. When Squidward is first transported there, he seems to be the only thing visible in this lonely place. Walking along further, he finds some square tiles and lifts one, causing it to disappear. After realizing that SpongeBob and Patrick are nowhere in sight, he relishes that he has finally found a place to be alone. However, after he hears a disturbing group of voices repeat the word alone, Squidward becomes frightened and tries to escape the realm. This proves futile as he keeps looping back to his starting point. Growing frustrated at this, he angrily stomps on the ground and falls through it, inexplicably landing in the time machine. Squidward finally breaks down and begs the machine to take him home, admitting that he even misses SpongeBob. At this time, he's finally able to go back to Bikini Bottom and escape the realm. That's it, guys. We hope you enjoyed the video, and see you in another one.